Hello everyone, and welcome to SQL in the City Streamed. In this episode, I'm going to show you how you can use SequelMonitor to help you maintain a compliant SQL Server estate. I'm Kathi Kellenberger. I'm the editor of Simple Talk at Redgate, and I'm also a data platform MVP. You can see on the screen how to get in contact with me, but I have to tell you that today I'm actually on holiday in Hawaii, so this session is being pre-recorded. First, I want to talk a little bit about what SQL monitoring is and why you might want to do it. So, SQL monitoring is a way to gather information from all your SQL servers into one place. And you're basically gathering information about performance and metadata so you can be proactive about problems. And the things that get most people to want to use monitoring are things like preventing problems that impact users. So for example, let's say that you're going to run out of drive space or run out of space inside a database file. You really need to be on top of that before it causes a problem for your users. So monitoring can help you with things like that. Reducing the time to do daily checks. So this would mean something like just taking an overview of your SQL Server estate, just first thing in the morning, spending that 10 minutes doing that. So you kind of have an idea of where the problems might be, which servers are going to cause some issues that day or what needs attention. And by having monitoring, you can see all of that in one place instead of going out to all these different servers. Diagnosing performance issues is probably the main thing that people think about whenever they want to monitor their SQL servers. Has anyone ever called you and said, hey, the server's performing great today? They haven't to me. So usually the end users are concerned when things are running slow. That's whenever you're going to hear from people. So you need to be on top of that. And really, with monitoring, you hope to take care of those issues before they become real problems. Also, it's really great if you can have reports built in, dashboards, the way you can, in one glance, kind of see how all of your SQL servers are doing without going to a bunch of different places. And the other thing that people don't necessarily realize is that we can use monitoring to help us with protecting data, with staying compliant with things like the GDPR or other laws and regulations that are out there. So this is one of the things I'm going to talk about today as I kind of show off SequelMonitor a bit, but I'm really going to focus on how you can use that to protect data and be compliant. Now, to do all of these things, you could probably write scripts yourself. You could probably build reports, but you're going to be spending a lot of time doing that. And so there are quite a few advantages of buying a monitoring software product like SequelMonitor. That's my favorite. And so I'm going to go over some of the advantages. When I first installed SequelMonitor, I just had a test server, and it was really easy to install, and I pointed it at the instance, and within a couple of minutes it started alerting me about problems with my SQL server. So I was really, really impressed that it took very little work to get that set up. The reason that that's possible is because we have best practices baked right in. And the other thing that you might be thinking right now is, well, there's a lot of best practices that don't apply to us, or I have different ideas about what different servers need. And we take care of that for you because we have configurable alerts. You can turn the alerts up, you can turn them down, you can have notifications go to your pager, you can have it go to SCOM. There's so many things you can do. And we also have some reports. We have some built-in reports, and you can also create your own. So yeah, again, one of the biggest advantages of having this monitoring software in place is that you can see what's becoming a problem, what needs attention, and take care of those things. If you're building your own monitoring software, you probably have to make adjustments for every different version of SQL Server out there. For example, I see SQL Server 2008 R2 everywhere. Everybody loves that version. But I have seen places that have SQL Server 2008 R2, 2012, 2014, and so on, all in the same shop. And it would be a lot of work to make sure that anything that you created yourself actually works on all those different versions. But with SequelMonitor, you don't have to worry about that because we take care of that for you. And another thing, and this kind of goes with security, is that maybe I have a developer and I'd really like for that developer to kind of take a look at the performance of this production SQL Server, but I don't really want to give that person rights to see that information directly. So by having monitoring in place, that person can take a look at weights, can take a look at performance, all of these failed jobs, all of these different things without even having direct access to the SQL Server. And in order to be able to gather all that information, otherwise he or she would have to have elevated rights, or you'd have to mess around with stored procedures, with certificates, and that doesn't even sound fun to me at all. And the other thing is that you can monitor large SQL Server estates. We have customers monitoring hundreds of SQL Server instances with our product. And we have a new feature called distributed monitoring that lets you monitor SQL servers in different parts of the country, different parts of the world, even in the cloud. And you can see everything in one dashboard. When I think of monitoring, I think of 4 main hubs that I'm concerned about: the physical resources, the configuration, maintenance, and performance. But what you might not realize is that data protection is part of all 4 of those different areas. There are aspects about each area that you need to pay attention to when it comes to data protection. Let's talk about resources. So resources are things like storage and CPU and memory, and also the networking. And this is just basically the resources that SQL Server needs. I have seen shops that didn't really have database administrators on hand. So often, anytime there was a performance problem that they didn't know how to solve, they would just add more cores to the VM. I've actually seen a production VM that had more cores than it had gigs of RAM. And that's really, really out of balance. And now that I think about it, I've seen it a couple of places. So, we want to make sure that there is enough storage. We want to make sure that the right number of CPUs are allocated. Even too many can cause problems. Memory is really a big problem that I see out in the wild. I thought that I was just it might be a coincidence, but then I started thinking that there's some document out there that says whenever you create a VM, it must always have exactly 16 gigabytes of memory. I've seen databases in the terabyte size on SQL servers with a gigabyte of RAM, and I've seen all the way to tiny databases where that was too much. So those are the types of things that monitoring can help with to help you understand if those resources are correct. Another thing that really comes into play when you're talking about data protection is classifying those SQL Server instances. Which servers actually need to be have a little extra attention because they have personal information on them. And a little bit ago, you saw Richard McCaskill talk about SQL Estate Manager and the SQL catalog that you can use to collect that information and identify which SQL servers have personally identifiable information. So that's a benefit that we can carry over into Monitor. At this point, those tools are not connected together. I'm not saying that won't happen in the future, but you know, we can take that information, and I'll show you how we can flag those particular servers in SequelMonitor in just a minute. The other thing that's important as far as resources, I kind of group this in resources, is just the versions and patch numbers. Wouldn't it be great if you had a live document that just automatically updated itself to keep track of these versions, so you know when you're going to have a, for example, a vulnerability because you're missing an important security update. So let's take a look at SequelMonitor, and I will show you exactly what I'm talking about. So here's the dashboard. And all of these, each one of these cards points to a specific instance of SQL Server. And you can see how some of them are yellow. That means that there are some warnings out there, some alerts, but it's not a terrible alert. Here's one that's completely healthy, nothing going on right now. If I scroll down, oh, there's some that are red that are offline right now. Those are unreachable. I mentioned that some of our customers use one dashboard for hundreds of SQL servers, and you may be wondering how in the world can they figure out what they're looking at with that many. So we provide many ways to filter this screen. You can, for example, just select all of them with critical alerts. For example, we have this grouping over on the side, and I'll show you how to modify that in just a minute, but I can pick a particular group. This is the sorting. This sorts automatically with the severity over on the left, but I could change that to go by name if I wanted. But the big problem that my customers might have if they have a lot of SQL servers is being able to see everything at once. If they don't want to filter, we have this little handy grouping, not grouping, but display as small tiles feature right here, where it allows us to see a lot of SQL servers all at once. Okay, I mentioned that I need a way to flag those servers that have personal information. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to go over to the Configuration tab and go down to the Groups session, and I'm going to add a new group, and I'm going to call it 0 Production PII. And I named it 0 so it shows up at the top. And then I can easily, after I've figured out which servers are important to monitor for that, I can just drag those into that group. And then when I go back to the overview page, I now have a 0 Production PII group at the top. And that way I know that these particular instances need to have special attention because they have PII. There's one more thing I want to show you here. Before I leave, this is a brand new feature. I'm not sure that it's even released out on the day that this show streams live. But this particular page will show you all the servers that you're monitoring, and if I mouse over, I can see the Microsoft Server version, Windows version, and I also see the patch level of each one. So for example, this one right here is at RTM plus, I guess it probably has a cumulative update. CPU Service Pack 2 is what's available. So this is what's available. But I'm still at RTM, I've got the version number, and then I've got this little warning here telling me, hey, this one's not up to date, we probably want to take care of that. So I love this. I remember keeping track of information like this in a spreadsheet, and I had to manually do that. This is so much better. I'm going to pop back over to the slides and talk to you about configuration. So configuration is another area that's very important because anybody can install SQL Server. All you need is the media and basically a mouse, and you can just click through and get it installed, and it's real easy to get a database in place, but you're going to end up with problems later on if you don't understand what's important with configuration. So there are certain things at the instance that are really important, such as tempdb configuration. Microsoft have made the installation a bit better when it comes to tempdb. They've made improvements in 2016 and 2017 as far as having multiple files and not starting out with a couple of megabytes with a bit bigger size. But there's still quite a few different configuration things you've got to think of at the instance level. tempdb is my favorite. That's low-hanging fruit for me. At the database level, there are several settings that you need to pay attention to. I've seen situations where auto-close was turned on because that database had come from an old SQL Express version, and that setting came along with it, and that was the problem. That was the reason for the performance issues. So there are several different settings we need to pay attention to. We also really need to pay attention to user access. Who has elevated rights? Who's in the sysadmin group? Who has permission to read that personal information? So I'm going to pop back over to SequelMonitor and show you what we can do here. The thing with these configuration items is a lot of them are not baked in as alerts automatically. So many of these you will have to use our special feature called custom metrics. And I love these custom metrics because basically anything that you can do a count on in SQL Server, you can pull in to a custom metric. And SequelMonitor treats that like it does any of the ones that come with automatically with the product. So if I go to custom metrics, I can see a list of the metrics, and one of them that is important for security and privacy would be principals with sysadmin login. So what this particular alert does is alert you if that count is above a certain number. So that's what it does, and that's a custom alert. So you may be wondering, how difficult is it to set these up? And it's really simple because we have this page right here called SQL Custom Metrics that explains how to set them up. But there's also, I'm not sure how many, dozens, if not 100, different metrics that we have already have made available to you. And we've also tagged them. You can search if you wish, but you can also click one of these tags, for example, GDPR, and find these metrics. For example, here's a select statement executed against a classified table. So if I needed to have that in my monitor on a particular server, I could read all about it. This particular one's going to need some work because you will have to supply what that table name is. But most of them, you will be able to just click install the metric, run through a little wizard that just basically says, I want it to be on all the servers or just some of the servers. Let me just show you. I'm not going to go through the whole wizard, but I can just show you what it's about. I have to wait a couple seconds for this. There it goes. It's populated. And there's the T-SQL. I can tell it, which servers I wanted to collect against, or I could specify databases. Then, test it if I want, how often do I want to collect it, and on through the wizard, set up how frequently you want it monitored, where you want those alerts to go. So it's really, really not difficult, and you can come up with your own. You could even submit some to Redgate if you came up with a really great idea. So the other thing I want to show you as far as custom metrics and custom reports. So there are reports built in. I'm going to go over to this one right here because I have a special report set up. On the report page, you can set up your own reports. I'm in a read-only mode on this one, so I can't create any new ones. But I'm going to take a look at this particular server and this particular date. And here's a report on server downtime. So if you need to keep track of that for GDPR or for whatever other reason, we have a new report, and I have to say that this report was created less than 24 hours ago. Redgate is amazing, and it will be part of the product by the time that this broadcast airs. The report will probably look a little prettier at that point. So I love this one because we've got this built in. This will not require anything custom. It'll be part of the product at that time. And here's another one on logon failures, another really, really important thing to keep track of for security and compliance. You know, if there's login failures, that should not be happening. Either the wrong person is trying to get to a SQL server they shouldn't have to get to, or there's some kind of problem with, for example, some kind of configuration somewhere in a service that needs to be corrected. So I love this. I'm going to pop back over to this one and go to the reports here and just show you that you can add tiles to existing reports. We can add new reports. I'm just going to call this one Testing SQL in the City and save that really quickly. And I'm not going to create a whole report here, but I do want to show how you add the tiles. You can either add the summary tiles where you have a list of things like longest running queries, or you can add analysis graphs. And I love the fact that when I look at all the different metrics that I could add, not only do I have the built-in metrics that SequelMonitor automatically collects out of the box, but I also have all the custom metrics that I've set up. So I could create a report showing me that principals with sysadmin login if I wanted to, and or anything else that is important here. So I think that's all I wanted to show you there. So I'm going to pop back over to the slides. And let's talk about maintenance. Maintenance is another really, really big item that DBAs care about. That was a big part of my job, just getting data around to different servers that need that data, like from the HR department. Like when a new employee came in, I had jobs to set them up in all these different systems. Saved a lot of manual work. So I really, really want to understand which jobs fail, which ones take longer to run, and SequelMonitor will alert you to those things. It's really fantastic in that. Yeah, long running jobs is something you may not even think about, but maybe there is a problem causing that job to run longer. Maybe it's bumping into another job. That's a big part of a DBA's job to figure that out. Backups. Are backups being completed? Hopefully most of you out there are testing your backups as well, because otherwise a backup is really not worthwhile unless we know for sure that it's good. Index maintenance, another really important thing, and there's a lot of ways to set maintenance up. You just need to stay on top of that. Database consistency checks, your integrity checks. SequelMonitor will show you if the integrity checks haven't been done within a certain time period. And these are really important even for compliance, for example, with the GDPR. The reason is what happens if there's an integrity problem with the database, but the database continues to work and that happens over time and you're creating these backups. Well, guess what? The day that you discover that problem when the database will no longer work, your backups are also not going to be any good. And that could cause an outage of this data. And if it's out long enough, that's reportable to the GDPR Commission. So be careful with that. It's a very important item. The other thing around maintenance is deployments. Keeping track of when deployments occurred and which tool was used, did it affect performance, and I'm going to pay particular attention to servers that contain personal data. So I'm going to show you how SequelMonitor can help you with these things. I'll go back over to SequelMonitor, and I'm going to go over to my read-only dashboard, and I'm going to click into this particular SQL Server instance right here. And when I look at the timeline, I can see this little red icon here. This tells me that there's a ready role deployment. So at the time that this is being broadcast, we have a new product called SQL Change Automation that you've probably heard about. But at the time of the recording, we still have ready role. So that's what I'm showing here. So here's a deployment. And if for some reason our performance suddenly degrades right after deployment, we may have to roll back, or we may have to apply a fix. Something's going on. And you may think, well, how do I compare how it looked last week to how it looks today? How was last Wednesday looking? So we have this really great feature, and I'm going to turn off some of these other items here. We have my favorite things: CPU, memory, disk, I/O, and weights. I'm going to turn those three off and just leave CPU on, and then I'm going to click this baseline. So I can easily compare how things looked in a previous time period. So what this is kind of like an average over the last 3 days. I'm looking at a 24-hour window, so this is basically the average of CPU over the last 3 days. So if I see anything that looks unusual, and I really don't, because look, here's a peak, and the last 3 days I've had a peak, and here's another one. So this one's a little bit different. So chances are there's some kind of a scheduled job or something that runs during that time. I also have this yellow dot. So the yellow dot means that some kind of alert has fired. And in this case, it's telling me that a job has failed. So I can click that and get more information over here. I've got the alert details. It tells me that a backup, SQL backup restore the job failed. So that is very important. And while we're looking at alerts, I want to pop over to the alert page. The alert page allows you to filter in lots of different ways. For example, maybe you only want to look at those that haven't been cleared yet, or look at those for any other type of criteria. But I want to point out a new feature called group alerts. So I have all these alerts. I've got deadlocking, I've got blocking. If I scroll down or move to the next page, I'll see even more. But what if this deadlocking is the same item reported over and over? Not exactly the same instance of it, but maybe the same code, the same actual thing that happened. So I'm going to click this group alerts, and then what it does is say, here is an example. This particular deadlock happened 1,400 times. This particular blocking process happened 230 times, but a different one happened 239 times. So since they're grouped together, I have less to be concerned about. It's easier for me to dig through what I'm looking at. So that's also a relatively new feature, and I really love it, because anything to make this tool easy to use, I'm going to be sharing. So I think that's all I want to show you as far as maintenance goes. Just your day-to-day DBA work, right? And let's take a look at performance. So performance is really where DBAs spend a lot of their time, because that's what's most important. Crazily enough, that's what's most important to the end users. I heard someone talking recently about a project where the end users were more concerned about how fast something was than the accuracy. I hope that's not widespread, but I just kind of had to chuckle at that. So one thing where performance, paying attention to performance can help you with compliance is with watching for maybe a denial of service attack. Is there some unusual network activity? Is there really unusual performance spikes? And then when you drill down, maybe you see some queries that don't make sense, or maybe the box itself has a lot of things going on and it's not the SQL Server taking up the CPU and the memory. There's something else. So that's an area where paying attention to those performance spikes could let you know that there's an intruder, or somebody's doing something they shouldn't be doing. You can look at deployments. I just showed you that just a minute ago in the last demo. And server availability, making sure that we understand when the server is scheduled to be down and we document those things. And we can use a tool like SequelMonitor to keep track of when the server's not available. For example, for something unexpected, we have alerts about short outages, and you can see whether the box itself was not, you couldn't contact the box itself, or you couldn't contact SQL Server. So we have those two things broken down. And we have that new report that I showed you in that previous demo. The other thing, this is my favorite. I love query tuning. Did you know that the parameter values are stored in the execution plan? So if you save an execution plan and send it to somebody for help, or put it on a forum for help, you could be sending along private information. I bet you didn't even realize that. And I'm going to show you how SequelMonitor can help you avoid that problem. So let's take a look at the performance demo. Go back over to my browser, and I'm going to go to my read-only dashboard. So the reason I have a read-only and I have one that I'm an admin on is because I needed to change a few things, create a report, or set up a new custom metric. So if you're an admin, you can do pretty much anything, right? If I am a regular user, like I am right now, I can see things, but I can't make changes. I also won't be able to see those parameters if I export an execution plan. I'm going to move this date over to yesterday. And this is actually where I want to go. So you may not know, but I can take this particular little window here, this little slider window, and I can make it a different size. By default, close that up so I get some more room. By default, it's a 15-minute window, but I can stretch it out. When I do that, the dashboards, all the graphs and everything below automatically adjust. So that makes it really easy to zero in on what you care about. I'm going to zero in on this spike right here because that looks kind of unusual. And I can see that, if I look at, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on all these graphs, but you can see we can see that the CPU was a little bit higher than normal at that time. SQL decided to grab some more memory because the lighter purple is what the machine's taking, the darker purple is what SQL Server is taking, so it decided it needed a little memory during this window here. And disk I/O went up 64 megabytes per second, and weights spiked quite a bit at that time. So I know something's going on, and if I compare the baseline, again I'm going to just undo these other ones and just compare the baseline, I can see that we're normally expecting a spike around here, but not during this time. So something odd's going on. Here I have the top 10 queries. I love gathering this information. You can do it with a query. You know, obviously you can do that, but this provides so much more. I love being able to sort by logical reads. That's my absolute favorite metric when I'm looking at tuning queries, or I can sort by duration or CPU time. I can look at the average per execution, or I can look at the total, that overall impact. But I'm going to take a look at this first query here. I'm going to scroll down and I see the query. It's not that big of a query. Select star from users or display name like @displayname. That's the one that's causing the problems here. And I can take a look at the query plan, the query plan that was saved when that query ran. And I can spend some time here. What I really want to show you as far as data privacy and protection is that I can download the execution plan. Now, I'm just going to click it here to open it up. It's going to open up in Management Studio if I wait just a couple of seconds. And this is how I like to look at execution plans. Close that. This is how I like to look at execution plans. But some people like to look at the XML. So I'm going to switch to the XML. And then I'm going to search for the word parameter. And there is the parameter list. Most of the time, when you save your execution plan, you will get the actual value here. Okay. Now, if I'm an admin in SequelMonitor, I'll still get that. But regular users just get this word redacted. So I don't have to worry that I'm sending private information around to people that shouldn't see it. Even if they never look at the XML, I've still done it. So I got to be careful now. So this is really, really a nice feature. I'm going to head back over to the, whoops, not the demo. I'm going to head back over to SequelMonitor and show you some other things that I really love about this tool. Did you know that you can look at the weight types that are associated with this particular query? In this case, it's CX packet. That's a pretty common weight type. A lot of people just react very quickly and change everything, turn off parallelism. That's not a good idea. This query needs tuned. Or maybe this query shouldn't have been run in the first place. Maybe somebody's doing something bad on that server, depending on what I find out. So it tells me the wait time in milliseconds and shows me that wait. If I don't understand what CX packet means or what to do about it, I can click on this little icon and that will bring up some material that explains what this means and how I can investigate why it's happening and what to do. So I just love this. Because otherwise, obviously I know what CX packet is. Probably most of you out there know what CX packet is. But if it's a weight type I wasn't familiar with, this is going to save me a lot of time because Redgate have gone out and gotten the good information instead of me going out to a bunch of websites and trying to figure it out. Obviously, depending on if it's Paul Randall's blog, I'll probably believe him. But otherwise, you know, it's some work to figure this out. So I really, really love this. The other thing that I love about SequelMonitor is this top 10 weights feature. Yeah, you can go ahead and run a query and get your top weights. And that's what this does. And this is the top 10 weights for this time period. That's harder to do. So if I just go out and run the query to find the weights, what ends up happening is I get the weights for that machine since it's been running. So that I'd have to take like a before and after. With this, I can go back in time. If if I need to go back and look at what the weights were for a little time slice last week, I can do it. So this shows me the different weights that are happening, and I can sort it. And I just love this. Let me expand this one right here. Let's see. Let me expand CX packet, since we've been talking about that one already. I have CX packet weights. What does that mean? I need to do some query tuning. Tells me what that is and shows me the affected queries. Now I have a list of those queries that I need to be working on. In this case, it's in this little time period, but I could make that time period bigger. One more thing I want to show you here, if I look at processes. So imagine that you have a SQL Server, a VM, and the CPU is pegged, and that is not normal for that CPU, for that particular VM. It should be around 60% at the biggest. And how do I know if it's SQL Server that's doing something? Is somebody run a really bad query that's causing a lot of issues? Or is there something more sinister going on that SQL Server? Is there maybe some spyware? Who knows? Maybe somebody got on that box and started surfing the web from there. Who knows? I've actually heard of a case where somebody used it to download movies. Not necessarily a SQL server, but a production server. I've heard that happening. So you can come in here on these processes, top 10 by CPU, and take a look at any time slice at which processes had the most, taking the most resources. If it's not something that you recognize, if it's not something that makes sense, maybe there's something running on that SQL server that shouldn't be. You can't just blame it on the SQL Server. Maybe, SQL Server is a victim here, not the cause of the problem. So I really love that. I'm going to go back over to the slides and ask you if you have any questions. If you do have questions, I'm not going to be answering them live today, but you can send them out on Twitter, hashtag SQLinthecity, and an expert on SequelMonitor will be watching and will be able to answer your questions right there. To learn more about SequelMonitor, you can download a free trial at redgate.com monitor, or you can try, we have an actual online demo that you can try, monitor.redgate.com, and it's pointing to some of our production and dev and test servers. So it's really pointing to servers that we use. Or if you have any ideas or questions about SequelMonitor, contact us at SequelMonitor@redgate.com. Thank you so much for watching today, and enjoy the rest of SQL in the City.